Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's really close to my heart as a clinical researcher, the deeply human reality of invisible balance disorders. I spend my days buried in data, looking at diagnostic tests and mechanical pathways, but it's absolutely crucial to remember that behind every single data point is a real person whose entire world has just flipped upside down. We're going to explore what causes these wildly disruptive inner ear conditions, how we actually uncover them in the clinic, and most importantly, how patients are finding their way back to a rebalanced life. So let's start with a critical question. What happens when an invisible force disrupts your daily balance and turns your world upside down? In the clinic, I see patients all the time who are just absolutely terrified by a sudden loss of their basic stability. Imagine waking up one morning, the room is completely spinning, your ears feel like they're packed with cotton, and you literally can't walk in a straight line. And because these vestibular disorders are mostly invisible from the outside, patients often suffer in silence. They look perfectly healthy to everyone else, while internally they're battling this massive storm of vertigo and disorientation. To give you a real sense of this, take Rishi. He's a cast member from the Vestibular Disorders Association's Life Rebalanced Chronicles. Rishi developed vestibular neuritis from something as common as the flu. Think about that for a second. Just catching a viral infection led to a sudden, massive vertigo attack, intense light sensitivity, and a constant feeling of imbalance. It fundamentally altered his everyday life as an active professional in New York. And then there's Nicole, who has such an inspiring story. She channels her struggle with secondary endolymphatic hydrops, which basically involves a severe buildup of fluid in the inner ear, into these incredibly beautiful, fluid abstract paintings. Her condition drastically affected her hearing and balance, but by painting her experience, she really proves that while these illnesses might be invisible to the naked eye, their impact is profoundly real. Honestly, the human spirit's ability to adapt and even create amidst that kind of chaos is just remarkable. So, let's get into the mechanics and triggers. What's actually happening inside the ear to cause all this? Well, a major culprit we see is eustachian tube dysfunction, or ETD for short. Think of the eustachian tube like a pressure valve connecting your middle ear to the back of your throat. When it fails to open or close properly, maybe from inflammation or just a mechanical failure, it traps pressure. It's essentially like having a broken valve in your head. And that trapped pressure is exactly what leads to that awful submerged sensation, the ringing tinnitus, and that profound dizziness. Now, if we map out this cascade of events, it gets really fascinating. When that pressure isn't equalized, it creates what we call a stiffness effect. The eardrum literally gets too tight, too rigid to transmit low-frequency sounds. On the flip side, if fluid builds up, we see a mass effect, which acts like a heavy weight that muffles high-frequency sounds. And the real kicker? This abnormal pressure pushes against the delicate little windows of your inner ear, which distorts the fluid dynamics inside your cochlea. That tiny fluid shift sends completely faulty balance signals to your brain, and boom, that's what triggers the severe vertigo. So what actually sets this whole cascade off? Surprisingly, it's often everyday things. Like we saw with Rishi, a simple viral infection, like the flu, can spark intense inflammation. But diet is a huge factor too. High sodium intake, eating too much salt, causes your body to retain water, which directly messes with the fluid volume in your inner ear. Then you've got caffeine and alcohol, which can disrupt your blood flow and fluid balance. Add in extreme stress, fatigue, or even just barometric pressure changes, like a storm rolling in or flying on an airplane, and you can severely throw off your delicate inner ear mechanics. Which brings us to the detective work. How do we actually go about seeing the invisible? In the clinic, our diagnostic toolkit relies heavily on comparing different test results. Two of the big ones are the audiogram and the tympanogram. Now, the audiogram is pretty straightforward. It tests your actual hearing capacity across different pitches or frequencies. But a tympanogram is a bit different. It actually measures the physical stiffness of your eardrum and the air pressure inside the middle ear. We literally bounce a sound wave off the eardrum and measure how it moves. That lets us physically see if the mechanics of the middle ear are locked up. But here's the thing. Physical tests are only half the battle. We also rely heavily on patient-reported data. Tools like the ETDQ-7 questionnaire are absolutely crucial. This is our first line of data for assessing symptoms like muffled hearing and pressure. Because at the end of the day, an accurate diagnosis really requires aligning our objective clinical readouts with the subjective, real-world experience of exactly what the patient is feeling. Okay, let's get practical and talk about the toolkit we use for managing the spin. For some immediate pressure relief, we often teach patients something called the Valsalva maneuver. It's pretty simple. You take a breath in, close your mouth, Pinch your nose tightly and then breathe out gently. That pushes air right up into the Eustachian tube, hopefully popping it open to safely equalize the pressure. But a quick clinical warning here, you should definitely sit down first before you try this. Suddenly shifting the pressure in your ear can momentarily make you feel pretty dizzy. Of course, a quick ear pop doesn't solve a chronic condition. Long-term management is all about lifestyle changes. We're talking hydration, sticking to a strict low-sodium diet to keep that inner ear fluid in check, and cutting out triggers like excess caffeine. But perhaps the most game-changing tool is vestibular rehabilitation therapy, or VRT. See, when your inner ear's balance system fails, VRT uses targeted physical exercises to retrain your brain. It teaches your brain to rely on a different balance system, proprioception, which is the physical feedback from the nerves in your feet and your joints. You are literally rewiring your brain to understand where your body is in space. It's tough work, but it's amazing. And that leads us to the final and maybe most important step, finding your new normal. As one patient shared online, the adjustments required can be huge. They had to give up their job due to the stress and learn a completely different lifestyle. But the key takeaway from their story is that life wasn't over. It was just a new normal. It requires a massive mindset shift. You might have to change your diet, pivot your career, or commit to daily physical therapy. But it reframes the illness not as the end of your vibrant life, but as the beginning of a fulfilling, intentionally balanced new way of living. So, are you ready to discover your life rebalanced? We want to leave you with that lingering thought today. For anyone who's just been diagnosed, or if you're supporting a loved one going through this, please know that discovering your new normal is entirely possible. It's a journey of incredible human resilience. As researchers, we're out there learning more about these invisible mechanics every single day so we can build better therapies. But honestly, the true strength? That comes from the patients who refuse to let the spin define them. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this explainer today.